Shadiversity.
So Tyranth and I have been looking at some of the worst sword defense videos we've seen. Like, they're pretty bad.
That's generous. They're not really sword defense. They're more just
Complete bullcrap.
make-believe.
Make-believe, but they are unironically trying to present, this is how you would defend yourself against someone who is attacking you with a sword.
Sure.
We have the reaction videos, you can check them out. And in watching that, it's actually quite clear that we have a lot of experience with swords. We've been using them for years, and there are some practical things you could do to at least lessen your likelihood of dying. We are not saying or encouraging you to try and defend yourself against a sword-wielding opponent, all right? If someone is trying to attack you with a sword, and by the way, one of the other things we've reacted to, right? It actually does happen. Unfortunately, there have been cases where some crazy person grabs a sword, usually a katana, and starts swinging it around and attacking people.
Sure.
It does happen in the real world. In actual fact, that scenario is more likely than if someone attacked you with a gun and you had a sword and you needed to defend yourself with a sword versus a gun.
That is correct,
Okay.
I would say.
So the first and primary thing is to understand that a sword versus a regular person, it's actually very, very likely you will get killed. Like, a sword is a deadly weapon. It's not nearly as huge a disparity as a gun versus a sword or a gun versus unarmed.
Sure.
Okay, but it is a massive disparity. A sword, they were very, deadly weapons and used in self-defense and warfare for a long period of time because they worked. And when someone has a sword and is intent on doing damage and injuring people, very likely to happen. And so, the first thing is, don't think that this means you could take on someone with a sword or we're encouraging you to do it. But if you could not escape and their intent to chase you down, there are some tactics and techniques that we would like to explain and point out that would be better than doing nothing or other things you might try and do.
Sure. The only thing I'm going to add here is you're not going to tank a sword hit. If you're someone who thinks that you can take a sword hit, these things can take your head off, your arm off.
It depends how sharp they are.
You don't need a razor sharp edge.
Well, here's the first thing that people should consider, right? Swords are deadly, but they are far more defendable. You can defend against them much easier than guns. First thing, if you have anything that you can grab around you,
A force multiplier.
anything to deflect, to put yourself between you and the sword, is your first primary thing. Can you get a stick? Can you get a broom? Can you get a chair? Can you get anything? Can you get a rock? Okay? Anything that you can get is going to enhance your ability to protect yourself, because as deadly as a sword is, it's not going to chop through a stick like this in one hit, especially if you're holding it. This has the capacity to knock and parry aside, and it's also a weapon.
Okay.
All right.
Just what are the caveats for these things? Because is the swordsman trained, or are they just a regular person?
Well, let's actually...
this is why it's hard to give advice on any of this, or even like talk about,
if the swordsman is trained...
It's so contextual.
Yeah, you should always be trying to escape. That's the first thing,
Run
right?
away.
Right? And if you pick this up, this isn't the license now to take them on one-on-one. This should be a defensive thing as you knock to try and get away and let the authorities handle the criminal, or people who are more prepared, any number of things, especially if a group of people can come and assist. There's been knife attacks where a group of people will come together and work together to incapacitate them in a safe way, so it's not just one person risking their life. Mm-hmm. So that's the primary tactic, okay? And depending on the skill of the opponent, that will vary. Most people who seem to do sword, attacks in the world are untrained, it looks like.
From what we've seen, I don't know if that's like a law, but from what we've seen, it seems to be a bunch of katana-wielding people.
It does. The katana usually is.
Just seems to be that way.
It does. Maybe you should be holding a katana in this video to make it more realistic.
No.
You have standards.
I'm good.
Okay, so that's the first thing. What if here they're aggressive, they rush you, and you don't have time to grab anything? What could you do?
Are you asking me? Or are you
Well,
saying that
I have some
rhetorically?
things. I have some things, but I am interested to hear your thoughts.
I'll hear yours first.
Okay, if someone is attacking you aggressively with a sword, all right, and you can't escape, one of the worst things that you can actually do is to give them room to swing it around at you. And people often do that by stepping back. Stepping back gives them continually room to do a lot. The thing that, this is counterintuitive and it's risky, okay, you actually want to try and nullify them being able to swing that sword at you. And if they're rushing you aggressively, if they are holding the sword back, what you actually might want to do is to rush them before they can swing at you and grapple. To try and nullify their ability to move the sword around.
That's contextual.
It is contextual and it's risky.
Because if somebody who knows how to use a sword, they're not going to be going like this. They are
most
going to
people
be
don't know
like this. So you try and rush me, go on.
I know, right? I'm running onto the sword, but how many people in these sword attack videos that we have watched are actually presenting it? They're always like, blah, 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 like
Sure.
that, okay? If you see someone who's trying to attack you and they're holding it like this, that's when you know you're in a bit of trouble. Okay.
So what Shad's saying a bit ineloquently here is the danger zone of the sword is in front of it or this portion here. Because of how your body works and leverage and stuff, down here the blade is moving a lot slower.
So if I run in,
it's
right?
going to do a lot less damage.
Exactly, and then if you just grab onto them, okay, it's going to be a lot harder for them to move it around. And then you just need to hold on for dear life, swing around, try and trip them, try and grab the sword. And literally, if you can get your hands on the sword and start wrestling like that.
That is more of a realistic scenario than a knife, because a knife is not the same thing.
Yes.
With a knife, you're in a bit more trouble if you try that.
Exactly, because even if I get in close with a knife is shorter, you can get the point on.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to get the point online with a big sword.
See, a knife like this,
Yeah.
if Shad tries to grab it, I can still slice him, I can still stab him, he has no control over the actual knife itself. With a sword, because it's so big, I can't really do that.
And there's leverage at play and multiple other things. And like I said, it is a bit counterintuitive because if someone is aggressing you with a sword and you're moving back, you're just giving them room to slice you up. If you see an opening, as soon as on maybe the backswing where they're there and you rush them, you actually might then have a fighting chance.
Remember, that's contextual, that they don't know what they're doing.
Yes, that is true. Just the probability is that it tends to be that they don't. From what we've seen. Don't bet on it, but...
To circle back around to what Shad was saying with a force multiplier, if you're able to find a large stick of sorts and somebody's got a sword, your best bet isn't swinging at them either. It's thrusting at their neck and their face, or maybe their groin. Thrusting is far more dangerous and deadly than slashes.
Yes, with a sword, it's contextual with a stick, but you get more reach and you'll be a bit safer.
With a stick, whacking someone, you can take that.
Yeah, you can tank a whack.
A thrust to your face or your neck, even with a stick, it will do some damage.
This is very true. I did mention your next goal is to get away. What if you can't get away? All right? And they're aggressing you and it gets into an actual fight. I think you should not try and take them on with your chair, your broom handle, your stick and everything. They are still very unequal weapons. There's a reach advantage there, and so what you want to do then is if they're hitting you and you're slapping it aside, you want to get it to a position where you can nullify it briefly to then close and go to the grapple. I think grappling and nullifying the sword is a much better option than trying to take them on with an imperfect weapon. Because you're giving them, because with the imperfect weapon thing, you still are allowing them the room to get a lethal strike on you. And they have an advantage because it's a proper functional weapon versus...
The deadly part of the sword is mostly here. Obviously this can cut, but when you swing this at someone, this is slow, this is fast.
Yeah.
And you don't want that part.
And so even if you had a chair and you block it with a chair, then rush them, drop it, grapple, nullify their ability to swing that sword around. Going back to then, if you couldn't pick up an item, right? And then what if they had some measure of training and they present the point to you? This is very difficult, right? The first priority should be to get away. There are some very high risk things you could attempt if you could do nothing else. But even before we get there, there is actually one or two things you might want to do, okay? If you are wearing a jacket, you take that jacket off and wrap it around your arm and hand as a deflective item. Now, it's not going to be perfect, but swords can have a lot of trouble, especially not super sharp swords. They're going to have a lot of trouble cutting through cloth, and that can actually be a viable defensive implement. Even perhaps taking off your shirt and wrapping it around your fist, your hand, or something like that to give you some measure of a barrier to try and slap aside and defend.
What Shad's talking about is actually rolling it up, bunching it together to create a very thick layer of something between the weapon and yourself. Because a shirt against a regular sword, it's not going to do anything. So you're much better off using it for that if it will do anything at all.
Exactly. Go topless, wrap it around, and it turns something that is on your body that's doing nothing into something that might be able to do something. And the thing about that, it might stop a couple of cuts, especially if the sword isn't super sharp. It's probably not going to stop thrusts, especially if it's got a good point on it.
Keep in mind, this isn't a knife as well. This does have force. So if that hit your arm, you will probably break a bone.
It depends on the force and depends on where on the blade, but yeah, there is some blunt transfer of force, yes.
A lot of blunt transfer.
And so going back to the on-point thing, the reason why I brought up the wrapping something around your arms and everything, because if you had a chance to try and deflect that and then get in close, you're going to get cut. Don't go, like, right? But what?
Because I immediately went straight into a throw.
I know, but right, if you could deflect and you're getting in close and then grappling, what your goal would be is to get past the point of the sword and then grapple. This is super high risk. It would be a last resort. You would end up getting a big slash in your arm or something like that, but that is better than getting a cut along your throat or your head where you're dead, okay? Or a thrust through your torso. It does mean trying to deal with the point, sacrificing your hand sometimes. So if the point is on there and you're like, don't hit me, and then you just try and rush and grab like this, it might increase your odds of survivability, but it's you likely will get cut doing that. So we're going to try and do some demonstrations where Tyranth is going to try and slash me and respond to my attempts to close, right, or deflect those first strikes. It is a little tricky here and there because there's trained and then there's trained. There's the person who is like, they can hold the sword in a stance because they saw it on TV and they might have done a couple of times, versus someone who was trained for years. It's actually very unlikely you're going to come across a crazy person attacking people with a sword who is a very well-trained swordsman.
You would hope.
You would hope.
What do you want me to do?
Well, first let's do point, right? And if I'm like, you know, trying to hear, I'm like, and so if you're already like this, don't hit me, and you're just like, so no, that one was interesting. I would have a cut on my head. It wasn't super powerful, but I would have ended up grappling.
It's not powerful because I didn't put any power into it. But there was one to there, there was one to the top of your head, and there was one at your neck. That was 3.
Was it 3? I think I got it then. I did not feel that touch me at all. Well, no, this is just a proof of concept.
No, I know. Yeah. It's just there was that initial thrust where I didn't fully extend.
So that's what I mean. Super high risk, okay? You're going to injure yourself and get cut. But in that last exchange, I proved, even against a trained swordsman, if you get close enough, there is a way to close that distance and nullify the blade.
But keep in mind, that is at point. So if Shad was doing that, and I had the blade loaded,
okay, this is different.
And then you try and rush me. I went a bit far over his head, but that was straight to the head.
So that would have like sliced my hand in 2 then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So very high risk.
Like we said, there's a difference between trained, and it's all contextual as well.
Doesn't mean you might not be able to close that distance if they're less trained, or just you could get lucky.
Maybe. I still don't think people realize how deadly swords are. Yeah. I know we're cutting pool noodles, we're cutting water bottles, but like, if that's your flesh, we're talking gashes that sever your tendons. And we're talking about things where you could cut someone's head off.
Well, this is the thing.
It's a sword.
Now, here is another important thing. If you're dealing with someone who has a sword that is super sharp, we're talking shaving sharp, trying to deflect with your arms could be a terrible decision, because that sword might actually have the capacity to go right through him, to actually chop off a limb. If the sword is not very sharp, it actually can get caught on the bone, okay? And if you're willing to take the big cut to deflect it, and you need one solid deflection usually to close the distance, that's a trade you might want to take, but you can't predict how sharp the opponent's sword is. A lot of katanas can come stock standard insanely sharp, even the cheap ones.
Katanas might...
They're the odd ones out. Katanas usually come sharper.
No, I'm just talking about like techniques used. Katanas are not as reverse edge cuts. When you go to grab for a blade, I can come over and I can go over to your head, I can go to the other way. I can do a lot of things that with a katana I wouldn't necessarily do. So, and it has a blunt edge.
Which you could grab a bit easier.
Sure, yeah, okay. You're still probably screwed, but at least there's a little bit more there where I'm like, oh, okay.
But I actually genuinely think these are some practical worst case scenario options that might keep you alive, and a bit unintuitive for some people, because if you're just, like I mentioned, edging back, you're giving them a room they need to kill you.
Exactly, don't edge.
You terrible person, Tyranth.
You said it.
It's your mind. Yeah. I think that kind of covers the main things that, at least that come to my mind, about what you might logically be able to do in a self-defense situation against a sword-wielding aggressor.
I don't know, man. They're all contextual and they're all dependent on so many variables. This is why I don't really like a lot of like self-defense stuff on the internet anyway, because it's so contextual. Like keep in touch, body type. A person's body type makes a huge difference.
Does?
Their speed, their own skill level, the skill level of your attacker, what weapon they've got, how much reach they've got. For example, this has less reach than the other one over there. It also has less handle room, so I'm generating a little bit less force. So many different variables.
It is, but I think what we've shared is some somewhat broadly applicable techniques, especially if you can't escape, grab something as a deflective item, anything, okay?
Yeah. And thrusts to people's faces, to their groins.
Let us know what you guys think in the comments below, and seriously, if you haven't seen, check out what some people claim to be functional sword defense online. We have reactions and it is unbelievable, wild cringe.
Magic. It's magic. That's what it is.
Yeah, check it out. Hope to see you there.